Hey, can we get 5 minutes? Because I seen a couple coming through. Okay. Sit anywhere you want. Thank you for coming out tonight. We're going to try to stay on close to schedule as possible. We have a lot of information to give you, and I really want to give Jimmy time to also be able to tell her story. I see some people coming in on the driveway, so we're going to give it just a couple of more minutes for the people that are watching. We will start within the next 5 minutes or so. Please eat, and you have items in front of you, and we'll go through those here shortly too. I got some feedback on that one. I'm going to turn you off real quick while I my mic is on. That's my fingers on. That's my fingers on. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and start. Please continue to eat if you want more. It's very open. Make sure that you signed in and you have a blue ticket for some door prizes because we have some really good door prizes that was donated by various departments here within the tribe. Um, First of all, I want to thank you first for coming. I planned everything and with the weather just did not cooperate and I was really scared that people was just going to say, "Oh, it's too cold and rainy and I'm going home." So really, first of all, I really want to thank you for coming out tonight and um, being a part of this. I don't think, and Assistant Chief, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we've had a domestic violence awareness a month within the event within the tribe in a few years. at least. Okay, so this is the first one in at least 3 years that we've been able to come together and talk about domestic violence and start addressing the issue within our community. So, first of all, the United Katua Band has been awarded the FIPSA grant, which is Family Violence. I went blank. Family Violence Prevention Grants. We received a very small funding from the federal government for it. And so this is what was able to put the event on tonight. I would like to introduce, first of all, I'd like to introduce Jimmy Ross. Jimmy Ross is our guest speaker tonight. Jimmy is sitting to my right. I'll tell you a little bit more about Jimmy here in a little bit, but first I would love to say welcome and thank you. I would like to introduce Assistant Chief Jamie Thompson. Do you have anything to say, sir? You'll wait. I'll catch y'all.
Thank you for this, and let's give our Jennifer a round of applause. Let's give our guests a round of applause. When she invited me to this, I've got all kinds of things going on, so I wanted to take time for this because this is very important to the people in our community, and I'm an advocate for this. I want you to know. And I just want you to know where I am about domestic violence. I don't have a very big tolerance for this at all, and especially for you know violence against women and children. Children are victims of circumstances, and so I just want you to know. Yep. Oh, I got to be out here in the middle. Huh? Oh, this is the target. Okay. The target. But anyway, I just want to thank each and every one of you for attending, taking the time out of your evening to come to this and supporting this. This is something that we need support of, and I hope it continues on. And I'm looking forward for great things from this grant and for Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer.
I've introduced Jimmy. I would like to introduce, and I'm not going to make him speak or anything, but I would like to acknowledge her daughters, Tiffany and Catherine. And Catherine's husband is with you tonight. I don't know, Moses. Moses is here tonight with them. We're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to touch on some of the things that the girls went through within the marriage as well. But we're not going to talk about that because they're old enough now to be able to tell their own stories, and they each have their own stories to tell. I would also like to thank our junior, Miss Katua, Destiny Wolf Kingfisher. Did I get it right? Kingfisher Wolf. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. Destiny Kingfisher Wolf is here, and we're really excited to have our youth engaged in this conversation because our youth are going to be our next advocates. They're going to be our next protectors. They're going to carry on this voice that we need. Anybody else? Raven Word? Nav? Is my Nav representative here yet? Okay, she was coming in from Norman. She may be on her way. I see Eric. Eric is with the BIA, and you are with the domestic violence program with the BIA? Blevins? Eric Blevins, in case you didn't hear that, he is with the BIA. He is a point of contact for the tribal domestic violence programs as well as a program analyst for the human services. Okay. I may interrupt. Oh, Joyce. Joyce Hawk is here. She is our secretary. And I really want to give a big thank you to Joyce. Joyce, when I decided to do this event, Joyce was my right hand and my money person and said, yes, please, we need this. It's important. So please, I'd like to give Joyce a round of applause for her support. If you missed it, please eat. I'm going to talk and please eat. I am not shy, so you can crunch and I'm loud and I can talk over the wrestling of the paper. But I'm going to talk about what domestic violence is, some domestic violence statistics, I'm just going to lay the foundation. So when Jimmy tells her story, you will have an idea and you can pick out some of the things that when I talk about what she went through. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Jennifer Cole Robinson. I am the Director of Health and Human Services for the United Katua Band. I have worked in the field of domestic violence and sexual assault since I was 22 years old. So I'm gonna tell you how old I am. I've worked in it for 22 years now. I started out young, working in our hotline here at Help in Crisis, and then when I was in college, I was offered the opportunity to work at our shelter. And so I was very hesitant at first to work at the shelter because I'd only been on the crisis line a few months. But Rhonda Wade was the advocate, the court advocate for Help in Crisis at the time. And Rhonda said, Jennifer, I think you can do this. So I said, okay, Rhonda, you have faith in me. I can do this. So I started working at the shelter. I worked from 5 o'clock at night on Friday night till 8 o'clock Monday morning. So it was me, myself, and I for 2 days with the women at the shelter. And I learned a lot quickly. Um, but I will never, never regret my time at the shelter because I grew and I learned. And those women taught me more than I would have ever learned in college regarding domestic violence and why they stay and the barriers to leave. So I did 10 years of child welfare as well. And then I moved and worked with the Bureau of Indian Affairs for 5 years with their victim assistance program. Had an opportunity to come back home and worked with at NSU under their victim assistance program. So I worked with students at NSU that was experiencing domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and harassment. And that was another world at the university level. I learned about Title VI. I learned about the barriers that college students experience in addressing these issues. And then the opportunity opened up here for me to come to the United Kituba Band, and here I am a little over a year and a half later. I'm really excited to be here. I love my job. I love working with our people, and I love giving the opportunity to help our people and educate. When one of the things that Jimmy's going to talk about is that lack of knowledge of what the resources are in our communities and in these relationships. So, an overview of our domestic family violence prevention program. I try to set it up to where we can do an array of things to help our members. So, we can do court accompaniment, which is really scary for victims to go into court. So, we are there with them, standing beside them, talking to the prosecutors, talking to law enforcement. If they need us, we will be there to help them and support them during that process. We also do protective order assistance. So if they want a protective order, we will go to court with them and walk through that process of obtaining a protective order, go to court with them for that protective order. We will also do deposit assistance, which is a really popular event because when victims are leaving, financial assistance is scarce and it's hard. One thing that I have learned is to give numbers. So in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, if we want to set up residency in a new home in Tahlequah, you're looking at first month's, last month's rent, security deposit. We're going to make numbers even because I'm not a mathematician. Accounting is not my strong point. So let's go even 300. We're looking at $900 right there. Tahlequah Public Works charges anywhere from 4 to 450 for their deposits. So you're looking at about 1,300 there. Uh, Utility assist, getting in. So you're looking on average to leave a relationship and start over again, on average $1,500 out of pocket initially to start at. It's hard. It's hard to come up with $1,500 to be able to leave. It's a barrier. So one of the things I'm really excited about our program is we're able to try to alleviate some of that burden by trying to help pay a month's rent, their deposits, maybe their utility deposits, so that when they are ready to make that final break and move on to a safe home, we're able to assist them with that. I want to remind you guys there's plenty of food. Please sign in. That's how you get your t shirts. If you don't have a blue ticket, see Caleb in the back because we have some wonderful door prizes that we're going to give away. So we're going to start right into it about on the agenda because I want to give Jimmy plenty of time to be able to tell her story and be able to ask questions later on if you want. So, domestic violence, also called intimate partner violence, domestic abuse, or relationship abuse, is a pattern of behaviors used by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. I use the words power and control because that is what we have to look at and that's what we need to emphasize. It is not anger. It's not because they don't can't control anger. It's about power control in the relationship. It can happen to anyone at any point in any relationship. Domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical abuse, battery, sexual assault, and or any other abusive behavior as part of a systematic pattern. That's a very important part too because you're looking at the pattern of power and control in the relationship. It's a systematic power pattern of power and control perpetrated by one intimate partner against another. It also includes threats, emotional, and psychological abuse. The frequency and severity of domestic violence varies dramatically. So, when we talk about, we also want to look at emotional and psychological abuse because in the women that I've worked with, they will tell me the bruises heal, the broken bones heal. What is hard to get over and what is the most difficult is my self esteem, not feeling that I can do it, being told that I'm stupid. That emotional, psychological abuse that they endure is the hardest part, and that's the longest lasting effects at times. So, why do we have Domestic Violence Awareness Month? It is held throughout the month of October as a way to bring advocates together across the nation to end domestic violence. Communities and advocacy organizations across the country will connect with one another in a true sense of unity to end domestic violence for good. It's a chance for everyone and anyone, including survivors, victims, advocates, supporters, and political leaders, to unite in our work to end domestic violence. It is a time of solidarity, support, and a time for victims and survivors to share their stories. With so many people speaking in a unified voice during the month about domestic violence, it raises our collective awareness about this critical issue. Only through collaboration and education and communication will it be possible to end domestic violence. How do you get involved in domestic violence awareness? You did that tonight. You showed up. You braved the cold weather, you braved the rain. You came tonight to find out. You came tonight to support the United Kituibian in our very first domestic violence awareness event. There are other ways to get involved should you choose to want to expand your involvement. You can volunteer at the crisis line. Every one of our districts has a domestic violence shelter within it. If you don't want to get involved on the crisis line, drop off monetary or donations to your shelters. Our shelters struggle. The women come in with nothing sometimes. So our shelters are providing for their basic needs. They need towels, they need pillows, they need blankets, they need shampoo, soap, anything like that. The shelters are providing those for those women. So you can make a donation to your shelter. You can go and speak out when you're our strongest voice. I've been doing it for 22 years. What I hope tonight for you is each of you, I was able to make up 40. Walmart has no more purple folders, by the way. So if you're looking for a purple folder, you're not going to find one because I bought them all. But in front of you is a purple folder for you to take information back to your home, back to your community. I have included information on what to say to somebody that is thinking about leaving. There's simplified safety planning. There is the power and control wheel. There's a cycle of violence. I have given you the tools to be able to talk to your family member the next time you see someone experience it and say, there is help. Because people do not realize there is help. People do not realize our program exists. People do not realize help in crisis exists. People do not realize how to access WISH, DIVIS, any of our shelters. Every tribe also has a domestic violence program that they can access as well. So that is how you can get involved this month, the remainder of the month, and I hope you do it moving forward, is to have these conversations, talk about it. One of the things that we're going to kind of go into depth with, I'm looking at the time, is some fact sheets and some information that I have for you. Marquana Forkiller was wonderful, and I'd love to thank her too. There's some information on the tables, and did I turn it off? She took it from my fact sheet here that we're going to go through a little bit, and we're going to talk about just some statistics, just some basic facts. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men. 1 in 9 men, and that statistic comes from men that report. When we look at domestic violence against men, our numbers are skewed because for a woman, it is hard enough to come forward and say this is happening. For a man, it's even harder because of our societal beliefs of masculinity and what it looks like. So 1 in 9 men is still too many men to go through this as well. They experience severe intimate partner physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, which impacts such as injuries, fearfulness, post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as a contraction of sexually transmitted diseases. 1 in 3 men and 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some sort of physical violence by an intimate partner. That statistic probably is closer to the truth. Of 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced domestic violence. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men have been stalked. Stalking causes the target to fear that they or someone close to them will be harmed or killed. When we start looking at domestic violence, we don't talk about the stalking behaviors that goes along with domestic violence. They go hand in hand. We want to treat stalking as a different crime, but when you're looking at stalking, more likely or not, there's some domestic violence in there as well. 66% of female stalking victims reported being stalked by a current or former partner. 66% of women. What is scary about domestic violence is the homicide rate. 1 in 3 female murder victims and 1 in 20 male murder victims are killed by intimate partners. So domestic violence, the lethality increases with each assault, with the length, with access to weapons. A study of intimate partner homicides found 20% of victims were family members or friends of the abused partner, neighbor, persons who intervened, law enforcement, or bystanders were murdered. 20% of the people that intervened in that assault was murdered. Victims of intimate partner violence are at an increased risk of contracting HIV or other STIs due to forced intercourse or prolonged exposure to stress. Intimate partner victimization is correlated with a higher rate of depression and suicidal behaviors. Only 34% of people who are injured by intimate partners receive medical care for their injuries. When we talk about domestic violence, we talk about it as I will give my caveat as I say she, because majority of victims of domestic violence are women. Men do experience domestic violence, and I acknowledge that, and I've seen that, and I've worked with men who've experienced domestic violence. But the reason we usually say she is because 76% of intimate partner physical violence victims are female, while 24% are men. 1 in 7 and 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men are severely injured by their partner in their lifetime. Slightly more than half of intimate partner physical violence is reported to law enforcement. We'll talk a little bit about why that statistic is there. When we start looking at Native Americans, Native American and Alaskan American women experience assault and domestic violence at a much higher rate than women of other ethnicities. Over 84% of Native American women experience violence in their life. 84% of Native American women experience some sort of violence in their life. We're 3 times more likely to experience sexual violence than any other ethnic group. Over half of Native American women report having been sexually assaulted in their life. 55% of Native women experience violence in their lives, and 66% experience psychological abuse. 17% of Native American women have been stalked. On some reservations in the United States, the murder rate of Native women is 10 times higher than the rest of the nation. 10 times higher than the rest of the nation. Native American and Alaskan Native children, this is our children, experience PTSD at the same rate as combat veterans from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Although the federal government recognizes 566 tribes in the U.S., there are only 26 shelters nationwide providing culturally specific services. So there are many shelters throughout the United States, and several tribes have started looking at opening shelters, but 26 provide culturally specific services to our women and men. That's my agenda. While we're looking at this, in your folders, this is the information that you have. I told you I want you to leave here tonight with a little bit of knowledge to assist your community members or your family members that may be going through this. So the first one that I want you to look at is tips for helping loved ones or friends get out of an abusive relationship. In my training and with my time working, this is probably one of the most important aspects and one of the most important sheets to talk about, because people always want to know, what do I say? One of the best things that, and we're not going to go through this verbatim, but one of the best things that you can do is, first of all, believe them. Believe them. Don't ask, what did you do to do this? What did you say? Those words, even though you do not mean it, are victim blaming, and it shuts that communication down. So believe. Let them know there is help and that you will be there. On average, it takes a woman not 7 times to leave a domestic violence situation. So every one of us has had a friend, a family member, a community member that we've taken into our homes. I've done it 2 or 3 times. They go back. We say, we're not going to do it again. We take them back. We support them, because each time they leave, they're getting a little bit more strength. They're getting a little bit more education. There are so many aspects of domestic violence and victimization that we can't go into that tonight. But the first thing is, please believe them and let them know it's not their fault and that there is help. When we start looking at the next one you have is safety planning tips. Safety planning is important. It is something that, as an advocate, we do all the time. When I worked at the shelter, anytime that woman walked out the door, we did a safety plan. When they came in, we did a safety plan. When I was on the crisis line, we did a safety plan, because we need to start looking and addressing safety. One of the most dangerous times for a domestic violence victim is when they're leaving. That is one of the most dangerous times because their abuser has lost power and control. When the victims go back, and this is something I want you guys to understand, when they go back, and I've worked with women, and they say, Jennifer, it's great here. I feel safe here at the shelter. Thank you for everything you did, but I think I'm going to go back. Okay, I say okay. I say okay because she knows that batterer better than anybody. I have an opinion, but she knows. So sometimes the safest place is back at home so that they can gauge where the train of thought is, what the pattern is, if they're spiraling out. I've worked with women that was getting 60 text messages continuously on their phone. And she knew that they were spiraling. So she had to go back because that was the safest place for her at that time. That's a hard thing for us to remember. So when you're looking at safety planning, think about safety planning. You know, let somebody know. Tell them, let me know when something happens. Talk to your work, talk to your neighbors. This is a really simplified, easy way to look at doing safety planning with your loved ones should they decide that they want to leave. We're going to go, I gave you a visual. I'm a visual person. So we're going to talk about real briefly the power cycle of violence. This is cycle of violence. And this is a cycle that when a woman walks into the shelter, they walk into my office, I talk to them, I say, I hand them this and say, tell me where you're at. Because unfortunately, with this, a lot of intervention is at this violent episode. This is where law enforcement comes in. This is where advocates come in. This is where family comes in. And they're upset, they're hurt, they're thinking about making that move. But what happens is we move into this honeymoon, remorseful. I can see it coming every time. I'm sorry. I'll send you flowers. I will go to counseling. I will change. Please, I love you. They're very remorseful about what happened. And as a victim, I've worked with victims and I say, they're going to text, they're going to call, shut your phone off for a little bit. Give you some time to decompress and think about what you want to do because this happens immediately. And what happens is I've been married 22, 27 years now. Ugh, I forgot. Got a few of them in there. But what happens is I remember 27 years ago what my husband did to court me and what we did in our date nights and the great things about my relationship. I can look at those and I smile and I still want those. When you're looking at a domestic violence and working with victims, that's the same thing they remember. They love that person. That person was not always what they are now. The abuse wasn't always there. So when they're remorseful, they want that person to love them and be that person they was that they fell in love with. Well, what happens then? Tension. They, after I'm back, after you woo me back, tension starts building. I remember we're working with a woman who said, he could walk in the door and I could tell you what my day is going to be like just by the way that they walked in the door. So that tension starts to build. And then we have another violent episode. And it's just a cycle that continues and that continues and continues. Sometimes it may be one day that they live in a violent relationship every day. Sometimes it's 6 months. I've worked with women that it was 2 years that it took to cycle through there. So this cycle is fluid, it's live, and each victim experiences it differently. Every one of us have a different relationship, and this cycle is different for everybody that goes through it. I gave you some definitions and some more information on the cycle of violence as well. The power and control wheel. I love the power and control wheel. This is probably the best thing that has ever happened to me as an advocate next to meeting Jimmy. When I told you earlier that domestic violence was not about anger, it is not. When I went to court and the court would order anger management for the batterer, my head would spin because we're not addressing the core issue of domestic violence. So when we're looking at domestic violence and this power and control wheel, what I do with victims is when they come in to my office, I have this ready for them And I say nothing other than, I want you to look at this. I want to give you a highlighter, and I want you to tell me what you experience in your relationship. That's all I tell them. By the end of them reading through all of this, majority of this will is highlighted because they experience those behaviors in from their batterer. So when, I'm not going to tell myself too bad, but some of us has been in fights before. And when you're fighting, you're angry, you lash out, you attack. When you're looking at domestic violence, that is not the case. You're looking at behaviors, those intimidations, the breaking of my beloved objects. I have a cat, love my cat almost more than I love my children. If I was in an abusive relationship, they would go after my cat because that was what is close to me. That was what would hurt me. That is what would keep me there. So when you're looking at these power and control wheels, look at them, learn them, talk about it because they are behaviors. What I have an issue with law enforcement is they're looking for that anger. And how many times are they angry? What we're not looking at in this investigation is these behaviors. I've tried to train law enforcement to look at this, take this on site with you, have the victim fill it out right then and there so that they can tell you what those behaviors are that they have in that relationship. We're going to talk real briefly about the most important question I think I've ever heard from general public to law enforcement when I did training with law enforcement to the court system. And those, it's 5 words. Why do they stay? Why does she stay in the relationship? We have shelters. We have the Family Violence Prevention Program at UKB. Why do they stay? So I'm going to, I have perfected this topic to a 6-hour training for law enforcement, but I won't give that to you today. We're going to highlight some stuff. So we're going to talk first about systems. We're going to look at law enforcement. Law enforcement, I love law enforcement, worked with law enforcement for years, have trained law enforcement. But law enforcement continues to go to the same house 5 times. They get tired of it. There's no arrest. There's no prosecution. They arrest them and they don't participate in prosecution. Law enforcement's busy. Or what I have had experiences with is we've put the woman in shelter, we did a protective order, and I had a law enforcement officer tell the batterer where she is. Will that make a victim want to report again? Because that is the experience that we've had with some of our law enforcement. We're looking at court systems not protecting, not prosecuting, not issuing protective orders. The court system, again, unknowingly asks that question, those victim blaming questions. You're looking at, I've worked in tribal, state, and federal court systems, and I have much respect for prosecutors. But I will tell you, I've had too many conversations with prosecutors about they will not prosecute this case because it is not winnable. They look at their win-loss column when they're looking at these cases. If I go and report and they do not follow through with charges, I would not report again either. I am disappointed in the systems that are supposed to be protecting me. A lot of our child welfare systems has changed through the years. And then unfortunately, what happens is child welfare is called in and the victim gets a case opened up on them for failure to protect. So their children are removed. If I am going to face losing my children, am I going to make that report? No, I'm not. And I've been told over and over again, if you report, child welfare is going to take your children. I'm not going to make that report. Those are the things that we need to, when we have these conversations about why do they stay, we need to also address those issues and hold our elected officials accountable for those issues. The community, I'm going to get on my soapbox real quick. When we respond and look at domestic violence, why are we making our victims leave their home and move to another community, sometimes 30, 45 minutes away from their home? We're not having him leave. The person that is accountable for it, we are not making the batterer leave. We are making the victim leave. They're leaving their home, their possessions, their work, their family, their support system, and moving for something that happened to them. We do not do that to any other crime, but we have them go to another place instead of holding the batterer accountable and making them leave. That's my soapbox. I would not leave my home, my community, my resources. I would stay. I would try to work it out. We look at limited resources in these communities. Tahlequah has pretty good resource for the most part for our area. But when you start looking at Stillwell, Sequoia County, these rural communities, they do not have the resources. Unfortunately, most shelters are a 30-day shelter and they are full majority of the time. We do not have enough resources to address the women that are going through this as well. The belief system is a huge one. I've worked with my best friend, very spiritual aspect of it, Catholic. When they were going through the divorce, through the abuse, they were scared to leave because divorce is not a Catholic um, approved aspect. So we have to look at that spirituality. I've worked with victims that the batterer was the preacher of the church. So when we have to start looking at also the spirituality of the victim as well. Do I want to end my marriage? I was raised that marriage is forever. You work it out. You communicate, you fix it because you walked down that and you said your vows before God and you work it out. But that's what they're going through, and we don't address that. We don't talk about that. And probably one of the biggest ones is this: they love them. They love that person. Good, bad, ugly, there is a love there. They remember that love. When I work with victims that come through my door and they're thinking about leaving, the one thing that I tell them is when you walk through that door, you cannot turn off that feeling. You can't turn off love. It is there. And we need to address that. We need to allow them time to grieve because when they leave, it is a loss of a relationship. They need to be able to grieve that loss. And we need to support them when they're grieving that loss. We don't need to shame them and tell them he or she was a dirty, dirty dog and you should be happy you're out. And that's not what they feel. They feel confusion, they feel love, they feel torn. The other one is fear. Fear is a huge factor to stay in a domestic violence relationship. The person that you love has said some of the scariest things to you, and you know that person, and you believe that person is capable of that. I told you earlier that the most dangerous time in a domestic violence relationship is when they leave, because what has happened is they've been told over and over, you leave, I will kill you. I know where your mama lives. I know where your grandpa lives. I know where your best friend lives. I will find you. And when I find you, I will kill you. I might even tell you how I do it. And they hear that and they believe that because they probably should. Because those statistics that I told you earlier is domestic violence, when you leave, that is the most dangerous time. So when we talk about why did they stay, we need to keep those things in mind. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I met Jimmy. I met Jimmy 22 years ago. I told you I'd been working at the domestic violence shelter for about 6 months. I was young. I've always been told I see the world through rose colored glasses and I'm going to be a savior. I'm going to go out and save everybody. My mom has always told me that. So I took it on. I went to the shelter and I walked in. I pulled up to the parking lot because it was payday too. So I went and got my paycheck and I saw Jimmy. And I saw a woman that was strong. I could see her strength. I could see her resilience, but I could see her fear. And I could see she was broken and bruised and it made a lasting impression on me. So I walked into the office that day, and my shelter manager, Sandra Thompson, she said, "Man, Jennifer, it's going to be a busy weekend for you." I said, "I saw." I was like, "What happened? Do tell, because I'm going to be here all night by myself." And so she gave me a little bit of history of what had happened, what was going on. And I said, "Well, I guess it's too late for me to call in sick, huh?" She said, "Yeah, you can't call in sick because I seen you." I said, "Okay." I said, "I'll be back at 5." So I came back at 5 and I saw Jimmy, and she was walking around and she had a crutch at the time, but her eyes and her smile, and she came in, she sat down at the desk, and we started talking. And I can talk, obviously. I can talk to anybody, but we found a connection because what happened was Jimmy found out she knew my family, and that's what Jimmy needed to hear. And when that happened, the story started. She started talking. She had talked some during the day, during the time that she was at the shelter, but that weekend, I got a crash course and I loved it. I fell in love. I have worked with Jimmy for 22 years now. This woman, she worked for the FBI. I love her. We joke about it because this woman can find me anywhere. I may have lost contact for her for 2 or 3 years, but she tracks me down when I was in El Reno, Oklahoma, and said, "Where are you? Because I need to talk to you." I was like, "I'll be back in a couple of days and I'll be there." So she has, throughout the 22 years, we've talked. We've talked at the shelter, we've talked at the coffee shop. She's done presentations for me. She has talked and talked, and I have yet to hear everything. And she reminds me every day, "You have yet to hear everything, Jennifer." She told me something this week that I had never heard before. So when you think about that, that's a lot. What I'm proudest of, and probably I haven't been able to talk to her, and I promise I'm trying not to make you cry because I'm trying not to cry, is the growth that I've seen in Jimmy in 22 years. From that first day I saw her to tonight to be able to tell her story. She has grown from a victim to a survivor, and now she's at an advocate. And I have been so honored to be on that journey with her. She is a proud Katua member, fluent, and is from the Greasy area. We won't hold that against you. She's a proud mother of two daughters that I introduced earlier, Tiffany and Catherine, and Moses is here with Catherine tonight. Tiffany's also married, but he couldn't be here tonight. Jimmy first met her abuser when she was a teenager, and she was with him for 23 years. When she left, she began her journey of healing with the help of her community, her family, and Help in Crisis. She has grown into a strong advocate for victims of domestic violence, and she has shared her story whenever she can. She's worked with Amnesty International, Help in Crisis, and she tells her story to Native youth to educate about dating and domestic violence. She has told her story to Amnesty International, spoke at the Oklahoma Capitol, Washington, D.C., before Congress. Her story has been picked up by the Washington Post, New York Times, the Telephone Daily Press, Muskogee Phoenix, and various other media outlets. She hopes one day to publish a book about her life and her experiences moving from a victim to a survivor and her journey as an advocate. Although she is one of the few women to come forward and report her abuse, unfortunately, her abuser never served any time for the abuse he inflicted upon her. He got 5 years probation. Her abuse could have been prosecuted in federal or state courts, and neither one. The state picked it up. The feds turned it down. Her abuser was finally convicted in Adair County for maiming. That conviction stemmed on the fact that law enforcement was able to see the burn marks that was on her face. The severe abuse she endured was not enough for the prosecutors to take her case because of the fact that they may lose it. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jimmy. I want Jimmy to tell her story in her words. We will have questions. There's also a notepad in your red bag. There's a notepad and a pen. If you have questions or anything at the end, we'll look at those questions and depending on what the time looks like, we'll move forward with that. But right now, I want to turn it over to Jimmy.
Whew, good afternoon. Of course, y'all know my name by now, but I'm Jimmy Ross. Um, I was in an abusive relationship for 23 years, like Jennifer said, and I met my abuser when I was maybe 16 years old, and I was kind of scared at first, but he kept coming over. So finally, I started leaning towards his way a little bit, but we wasn't even together a few months, and he slapped me. And I'm like, whoa, what'd I do? He slapped me. Because when I was growing up, I never seen none of that in my family. Um, my grandma always told me that when you're with somebody, you're with them forever. So I stood on that. So the little slap started, it turned out to be a little shove, a lot of name calling. Um, I wouldn't tell nobody about it. I was ashamed. But I could just by the way he was driving, I knew what kind of mood he was going to be in. Just the way he walked, he talked, and he looked. I knew what kind of evening I was going to have. And my oldest daughter was, she stayed with my mom the first 3 years. And from the start, she never wanted to come home because she didn't like him. I'd go pick her up Friday evenings after work, and she would run and hide under the bed because she didn't like him. And we'd have to bribe her. Barbie doll, She loved me, but she didn't like him. You know. So, anyways, it I brought her back home, and it kind of started getting worse when he thought she didn't belong to him. He started using that against me, and but I had already moved down there with him, so there was no way out. So I went ahead and I started, just putting up with him. And he's tried to push me out of moving cars. Uh, I've had to jump out the window in the middle of the night to run from him, but I always returned. I have left him so many times, but I always returned home because I knew that my kids had a home, had a roof over their heads, and they wasn't starving. So I was willing to go ahead and put up with what I could with him just so my kids were not homeless. So throughout the years, then I had my youngest one. My youngest daughter, he wasn't happy about that. He really didn't want the second child. He fussed about it for a long time. But when she was born, right away they kind of bonded. She bonded with him, and he was okay with it. That it was a girl. He really wanted a boy, and he right after she we brought her home from the hospital, he started again. I think the 9 months I was pregnant with my youngest one was the best time of my life with him. He never laid a hand on me. He watched himself around me. I loved it. But as soon as I brought her home, he started. He would take her from me. He would try to throw her off the bridge. He would try to run off with her. He took her one night and we couldn't catch him. He took off in his truck, and it was me, my oldest one, and his mom. And we had to call the cops. So when we finally found him, he was back home, and the cops went on in, and he was passed out on the bed. and she was laying under his leg, barely breathing. So the cop pulled her out and gave her back and told us to leave and leave him alone. He'll be okay when he wakes up. He's drunk. So we all left, and when we came back the next morning, it started again. Well, you left. You did this. You did that. So the abuse was really getting bad. A lot of pushing, a lot of threatening. I couldn't see my mom. I think I could probably count the times that I see my mom in 23 years because he didn't want me to go see my family. And I let him do that to me. You know, I let him. But that was just to keep the peace. I didn't want to hear him griping. I didn't want to be crying all night. So I wouldn't go see my mom. And I actually let him turn me against my mom. Uh, so, 23 years, it was a week. For me, it was easy. It got to be really easy for me to fake a good day. I didn't like him. I, I was more scared of him. But I don't know. Maybe I hated him. I don't know. But I did whatever I could for my kids. So through the years, it just got really easy for me. I can fake another night. I'm okay. Look at him and smile at him. But inside, I was crying like, oh my God, please help me. I would, I would actually pray that he would never come home. Please, God, just let him die. Just let him die on the way home. We'll be okay. Or just let him get hurt. Let him have a stroke or let him break both legs. I'll take care of him forever. That didn't happen. So, but it was like every day, my fingers, I'd be walking around, me and my kids, my oldest daughter. She wouldn't even eat at the table with us because of the way he was. If there was anything wrong in his food, the table would go up and all the food was on the floor. And there's times that he's made me eat a burger off of the floorboard that he threw in my face and then it fell to the floorboard. Then he made me eat it because he bought it. He worked hard for that money. So you're going to eat it. So I sat there and I chewed and chewed and chewed on that burger until I was done. And she would not eat. She would go in her room and eat and stick her plates under the bed. And she was nervous. I couldn't eat either, but I had to sit there. My youngest one, every time he started arguing around or he'd say, he just nitpick, nitpick, nitpick. My youngest daughter would jump up and get in front of us to keep him away from me. She'd, you know, hey, Dad, let's go do this. Let's go fishing. Let's go look for airheads, just to keep the peace, my youngest one. I think that's all she did when she was growing up, was try to keep the peace. He started catching on later on. Um, he took us out Labor Day weekend, one weekend, and got out there and he just nitpicked. And he hit me on the head with the fishing pole because I wouldn't fish or I wouldn't smile. And my youngest daughter loved to fish, so she was down there fishing, but it was hard for them to enjoy the day because they kept looking at him and looking at me because they knew something was going on. And my oldest daughter ran up the rocks and I guess she was going to go get a cell phone. He had the cell phone in the truck, or maybe she was going to grab the gun. I don't know. But she took off running up the rocks and he seen that and he told her, and you stop. You stop right now. So she stopped and I'm sitting down there and I thought, okay, I'm going to run because I used to run from him. That way he would chase me and leave everybody else alone. So I'm sitting up there and when he hit me on the head, there was people around there and here comes the lake patrol. They pulled right on up and, hey, are y'all okay? And yeah, we're okay. We're just having a little bit of disagreement. So they left, and then he was really mad. So I tried climbing up backwards up them rocks, and I kept thinking, man, if I could kick these rocks, I could really do some damage. And but I kept thinking about my kids, that's their dad, and so he caught me. So we all had to leave. We're going down the road, 100 miles an hour, trying to push me out the door, and I'm hanging on the door, and he's hitting my face with the beer bottle. And I kept trying to get back in. He kept telling me, jump out, jump off, I don't care. But both of my kids were in the back, and I kept looking in the back, and then the youngest one started hitting on the window, I'm having an asthma attack, I'm having an asthma attack. And he didn't believe her. So finally we stopped. He put our youngest daughter up front, and my oldest daughter stayed in the back. She didn't want to get up front. She just said she'd stay in the back. So we took off, and she stood in the middle, right in the middle between me and him, and she just kept, you could tell she was really, she didn't know what to do, but she was trying to make him stop. And when she wasn't looking, he would grab my arm, and my whole arm right here was just black where he kept grabbing me and just pinching me. And then when she looked, he'd smile. He had this smile. And so we finally made it to Mountainburg, and um, I had to use the restroom, but he told me to go ahead and pee all over myself. So I did. And then he made me go into the store. And I was ashamed because it smelled like pee. Went in, and oh, it was nothing to him. He said, "Look at this. Do y'all want this? Do you want me to buy you this?" He was okay after that. Um, he was carrying her around. So we left, and we went on to this there was a bunch of cabins out there, and all of a sudden he started in again, and he got out. He made us all get out, and he got to the bridge and picked my youngest daughter up, and he said, "Okay." He kept talking to her, and I kept saying, "No, we don't need to do that. We can work things out." I had to really play real nice to calm him down. I had to eat crap, but I I told him, we'll work it out. It'll be okay. I won't do that. I won't make you mad no more. But he picked my youngest one up, and he kept swinging her off over the bridge. Hey, we don't need to be around here. They don't need us. Your mom and your sister, they don't need us. We can end this right now. Maybe we can just jump off the bridge. He kept telling her. But he wouldn't listen to me. But he kept talking to her, and her being so young, she was just like smiling around, and he just kept trying to swing her off the bridge, and and I'm begging over here. Finally, I talked some sense into him, and we left. We ended up back home that night, and it continued. And he put a double barrel shotgun in my face and my oldest daughter's. And my brother was there before we got to back home. He told me to leave. That when we get home, you can just leave. I don't care no more. Just let me see my kids. So, and I was like, thank you, Jesus. But when we got home, he seen my brother out there, and he says, "Oh, by the way, y'all need to go on in the house." We went in the house, and he went and got a gun, and he said, "You're not going anywhere, and if you try, I'm going to shoot your brother. I'll kill your brother." And then, he said, "I'll blow up the TV," and he showed the double barrel shotgun to my oldest daughter. And, I'm like, okay, 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 we're going to be okay, So we were fake laughing, and we were all just shaking and fake laughing at the same time, just to let him go on outside and talk to my brother and my brother's friend. And when he came back in, it was okay, you know. So a few days later, started again. It was really rare that I didn't have a bruise on my body. He'd come home. He'd ask me how many bullets was in a pistol, and I don't know. They're your guns, and that's all it took. Then he'd start again, and he'd shove it in my face. And my oldest daughter says, "I need to use the restroom." So as soon as I wanted to take her, but he wouldn't let me. So when he took her, I took off running. I took off running. Sometimes I would run so fast I would fall, but I'd get right back up and keep on running. And I fell in creeks. I fell up against a barbed wire fence, but I'd still keep on running because I wanted to get away. Because I knew that if I ran, he was going to chase me and leave my kids alone. So we did that for many years, and there was times I had to hide in the water, my face barely sticking out to where I could breathe, and he'd be looking for me, and I'd be watching him. And then finally, I'd hear the dogs barking, and then I'd get back up. One time, I followed the water all the way down to a neighbor's house, and I got up, and by the time I got to their door, I was black and blue from being so cold. It was in February, and I ran without no shoes, and I just dove in that water under the tree. And of course, I went back home. Things was going to be different, and he was just mad, or you make me mad. I just hate you. I love you so much. I hate you because you make me mad, and you make me do this. So things would be okay for a little while, and then something else would come up. The best times for me and my daughter was when he was gone for 2 or 3 days. We could breathe. We got along. Um, we did what we wanted to do. We could watch whatever we wanted to watch. And when he was home, he would come in and turn the TV off and the lights off, and he'd say, "Well, I'm sleeping in the living room right now. Y'all need to go to bed." So we all had to get out of the living room and go into the bedroom, and then he would be huffing and puffing in there, just Then finally he'd get up and it'd start again, and it got to where we hardly ever slept. I would paint the house all night long because I knew I didn't want to get woke up. But sometimes I'd paint the house for 2 whole nights. I'd paint the whole house, and he never came home, and I lost all that sleep for nothing, you know. So it just got there was so much happened in 23 years that we'd hide in the woods, we would run. There's times I had to put my kids under my shirt so they wouldn't get bit by mosquitoes, and we'd be out there real quiet. And, he'd be walking up and down the road, hollering around and trying to find us. And, we'd be real quiet. And then when we knew he was asleep, then we'd sneak back in the house. Nobody really wanted us because they were afraid of him. Wherever we went, he found us, or somebody would tell him where we were. And, he would embarrass me, and he'd come into people's houses and drag me out. And most of the time, I would just go with him because I didn't want him to hurt anybody. So I just got to where I didn't think I could run to anybody. My family didn't know anything was going on. I never told my family or really anybody that I was going through all this. I kept it to myself. It was just me and my kids. So it was getting more dangerous. It was starting to get sexual, and he would tie me up in the back of the truck in the middle of the night and just drive while I was tied up to the back of the truck. And half the time I didn't know where I was because he started drugging me. And he'd just lay me out there on the bed and just drive around. And then he'd get tired of driving, and then he'd stop and untie me, and then he'd tell me to get back in the truck. Sometimes he'd dump me off somewhere, and then he would come back and pick me up. And there's one day he put me in a cave and tied me up in there naked and wanted to see what or who was going to come and find me. I was tied up in a cave, and nobody ever came. So he came back. He untied me, took me back home, and tried to shoot me on the way home. He'd tell me to run, um, or let's play a game. Hey, I go hide over there, and I'm chasing you. Just stupid games, and it turned sexual, really, really bad stuff. and my kids were at home, and my ex mother in law was always with the girls. But it really affected my kids a lot. But where was I going to go? How was I going to make it? Because he would tell me stuff like, okay, I'm done with you. I don't want you no more. I'm tired of you. And I'm like, oh my God, yes. And then he'd say, you can leave. Oh gosh, I can take my kids. Yeah, you can take your kids, but just let me see them sometimes. Anytime, anytime. I just wanted that little bit just to get out the door, and I was going to take my kids, and he'd say, if you walk past that door, I'm going to shoot you in the back of the head. So it's up to you. Do you really want to leave or do you want to stay? Oh gosh, I guess I'll stay. Okay, that's what I thought. We can make this work. But 2 or 3 days later, he'd say, well, who's going to help you now, bitch? Nobody's going to help you. You're here with me, and I can do whatever I want. And then it started again. I was always shaking. You know, Half the time I'd go out with a smile, and my kids knew as soon as they got off the bus. Sometimes they wouldn't even halfway up the driveway. They'd be saying like, "Is he mad? What's wrong?" They already knew something was going on just because the way I looked, or the way I was sitting outside, or maybe even the way I was standing. They already knew that something was going on. Oh, it's nothing. Let's go over here. Dad's a little mad, but he'll be okay. I always made excuses for him too. My oldest daughter started feeding his dogs, I think, when she was 6 years old. Every day she would feed his pit bulls and water them every day after school till she was 18 years old. Every day she she fed them dogs, or she was too lazy. You're so lazy. You just have to go out there and feed the dogs. That's all you got to do. Why can't you do that? And I even told him, well, the youngest one's 6 now. Maybe she can have. Oh no, she can do it, because he kind of held a grudge against my oldest one because he said that my oldest daughter wasn't his, but she was because he raised her. And then he said the youngest one wasn't his because, but she was because he raised her. That was because of me. I'm the one that caused all of this because those kids belong to somebody else. But it went like that for so many years. And I thought I was doing good by keeping my kids there because they had a home, they had food, and all I had to do was put up with him and his ways. It's going to be fine. I can do that. I can fake it again. I can fake it. I did it for 23 years. I faked. And I really hated him so bad. I really wanted him to die. But I knew if I killed him, I would go to prison. But if he killed me, I knew he was going to get away with it. It was always mixed emotions. Or there was times I took a pistol out of his hand, and the look on his face was so scared. And then I'd laugh at him. I'd just take the bullets and throw them out and give him back the pistol. I just wanted to see what he was going to do. There was times I wanted him just to leave. Go find somebody else. Just leave me and my kids alone. But I would always dream about moving and me and my kids doing so well, and, getting up on our feet and having this kind of life. And I think that's what kept me going, was that dream of one day me and my girls being away from him and walking on the sand somewhere in the ocean, stuff like that. But I think that's what kept me going. But for 23 years, all he had to do was say, "Hey, baby, I love you. It's going to be better." I'd, like a little puppy, go back home, you know? And then 3, 4 days later, and I'll be like, "Oh my God, I wish I stayed away." But it was just uh, trying to survive, you know? I didn't want him to kill my mom because he threatened to kill my mom. I didn't want him to kill anybody in my family. So I sacrificed all that for 23 years. So it really, the last 5 years, it really was getting worse. He started hitting me with whatever, like a iron, or he'd just throw me in a corner and just spit on my face. He'd dip skull and he'd just sit there, you know, what am I going to do today? He'd chew. Oh, I don't like this skull. He'd spit it all over my face. And I'd just sit there and I'd just stare at him because he told me not to move, so I didn't move. He told me not to scream, so I didn't scream. He told me not to run, so I didn't run. You know, he just spit in my face, and I just sit there. He'd like, man, I just don't like this anymore. Or, oh, this cigarette isn't no good, and he just put that cigarette out on me. You know, and I just still sat there. It got to where I could handle just about anything, just to survive. Or the wheels in my head was already rolling. Like, okay, if I can run over here, I can get out. I can run. Or, okay, so I was always thinking about the way to run so he could chase me and leave my kids alone. I've jumped out the windows. I've jumped out of his car and I've landed in a ditch, and I returned right back home. And he would say, "Damn, baby, I love you so much. I hate you. You make me do all this to you. Why? Why all I want to do is love you." And I'm like, you know, take me way out of town somewhere and just do whatever he wanted. He'd make me take drugs. I'd take them because I didn't know anybody. Where would I run to? I would take them. He started shooting me up with meth. And one time I almost died in a motel. And he got scared with that one because I just fell over. And all I heard was, "Damn, baby, don't die on me. Please don't die here." All I felt was covers all over me. He kept piling me up with covers because I started shaking, and I couldn't hardly see nothing. I seen something, but I don't know what I seen. I think my eyes were rolled back. But and he threw me in the tub with hot water, and then he pulled me out and pulled me back in the quilts and just rolled me up like a big old hot dog. And I just laid on the bed, and for 2 days till I finally started coming out of it. And then he took me back home, and then nothing after that. I never mentioned it. I would never say, "Well, you did this or you gave me this." You know, it got to where he made me drink uh, liquor, but it got to where I would drink it, and I would, on the side, just let it kind of pour out on this side while he wasn't watching. And he'd like, "That's good, isn't it?" And I'm like, you know, "Here, smoke this." And I'm like, I'd smoke it, then I'd go, just let it out on the side where he wouldn't see it. And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's good. That's enough. Oh yeah, we're about to have a good time, and stuff like that." And then one wrong move, then, he'd be trying to push me out of the vehicle, or I'd be laying out somewhere. And, it got to where it was just, I got so used to it. It didn't even bother me no more. And my mind was always at home, like, wonder what my kids are doing right now. I should be home with my kids. You know, my youngest daughter was always outside. It didn't matter how hot it was. She'd be walking around. She'd just be going to her hair. Never said a word. Just outside with her chickens or Kermit the Frog. Just always out there playing, feeding Kermit. Never, she was never a problem. My kids never cried. My kids never begged for candy at the store. You could take my kids to somebody's house and they sat down and they wouldn't move. And if the other kids would say, "Do you want to go play?" They'd look at me and I'd go, "Go ahead and go play." Then they'd go out there. They were so well mannered. My mom, They would never just get up and ask her for anything. They'd say, they didn't even call her grandma. They don't. They call her by her name. Hey, Lil, can we have water? And she'd say, why you asking? Go get your water. That's just how my kids were. They were always sitting in the back seat. They'd fight each other, but it was like me and my oldest daughter raised my youngest. And but it got to where I never wanted to die because I didn't want anybody else raising my kids. But he told me that he would kill my youngest daughter first, and then he would shoot my oldest daughter, and then he would shoot himself in the face, and then he would let me live so I can go crazy thinking about what I made him do, and it would be on me forever. It was just for 23 years. That's the things that I had to put up with. I tell people the best time that I had with him was when we were on his motorcycle, because I was behind him and I didn't have to look at him in the face. I looked at the back of his head, and that was the best time of my life. I'd be sitting on the back of his Harley, and I could just be looking out there. I couldn't hear him. I couldn't see him. That I really hated this man, but I still went home to him because I had nowhere to go. So, and that was for 23 years, just little things. If I didn't walk right, then that's all it took. Or if I didn't pick up the right tool, he'd start in calling me all kinds of names, um, saying I wasn't no woman no more. I was just a piece of turtle shell. But he didn't care. I was the best mom in the world. My kids had the best mom, but I was not a woman because I didn't have no woman parts. Because from where he beat me so bad all through those years, I had 13 surgeries. And I was no longer a woman, which was fine with me because I hated him anyway. So we could never have a good time. We just never could have. We just couldn't do it. It was just he was too much. He was really needy, and when I paid too much attention to my girls, he would call me in the bedroom, and all he wanted was crumbs, and he couldn't even get crumbs from me. That's all he wanted. Or if I was shampooing, and I didn't shampoo the carpet with the shampooer, I shampooed my carpet with my hands from one end of the room, just on my hands and knees, just so I didn't have to put up with him. I pulled up every rock in our yard and made our yard so much bigger just so I didn't have to put up with him. I didn't want to look at him. I hated him. I did whatever I could just so I didn't have to, but I had to. I had to because he would say, hey, you need to come over here a little bit. If I fed my chickens and I didn't look at him, he would shoot my chickens. All my hens had one legs just because I didn't pay attention to him. You know, just it, I didn't think there was anything wrong at the time with the way I was living. Nobody's ever taught me about domestic violence, or I was too ashamed to tell anybody because I don't think anybody else lives like that. So I really don't want to tell nobody. Or they would tell him, he would find out. I don't know how he found out about things, but that man knew exactly where we were, what I was saying. I thought there for a second I was bugged somewhere and I'd just be looking around everywhere. And I thought, maybe it's on my clothes or somewhere, but he knew exactly the things that I said most of the time. And I agreed to go with him places so my kids didn't see the things that he did, but they knew there was something wrong. And it got to where he started hitting my oldest daughter. He started abusing her. So when I would run, I ran out the window one night he didn't chase me. And before I would run, and my ex mother in law would get the girls, put them in the car, and he would go one way and she'd go the other way. And then I'd meet her somewhere and I'd jump in her car and we'd take off for 2, 3 hours, but we always returned. He'd be home asleep. And there was times when he would not run after me no more. He started taking it out on my oldest daughter. He started putting a gun to her face. She told me at one time that while I was gone, he slapped her across the face and she seen stars because he thought she was lying. She knew where I was and I was at another man's house, you know. Um, but I would always return home because of my kids. So one day I put the phone in the wrong place. He told me, get a phone so I can keep in touch when I'm on the road. So he said, just put it right there by the door where the old phone used to be. So I called, had it put in. Well, he decided he didn't want it there. So he wanted it in his shop. And I told him, well, you told me, no, I didn't. It was just me and him and his mom at home. The girls were both at school. But anyways, he kicked my leg in so bad I almost lost my leg. My whole leg up to my hip and my toe was black when I got to the doctor. So I had to. I didn't go home. I went to his sister's house and I was laid up there. So while I was laid up there, I got to thinking a lot that that house is no longer my home. You know, it just didn't feel the same. So in April, he started on April the 18th, and he started calling me, told me to come and get my stuff. I went down there. Again, I went down there when he called. He just wanted to argue. So I left. I went back to his his sister's, and he called me right back. He did that to me all night long until early in the morning. And every time I went down there, he done something bad to me. He hung me on a door with a rope. About broke my arm off. I got away and ran out the door, jumped in the car, his mom's car, got away. When I got to his sister's house, he was already on the phone. And I turned right back and went back to him. It was like how some people are addicted to things. It was like I was addicted to him. Hey, you need to come home. Okay. I love you. Okay, I'll be home. Where you at? I'll come pick you up. That's how it was. So I got home early that morning on April the 19th. And he I told his mom, I said, hey, wake me up. I'm gonna sleep for a little bit and we'll go to church. She said, okay. His mom went with us everywhere. He was abusing his mom too because she took up for me. And so he pulled up and he says, hey, I need to talk to you. Let's go out. And I didn't want him to cause problems at his sister's house. So I got up. I agreed to go outside with him. And he blindsided me and he hit me in the face with his fist and threw me in his truck. And as soon as he took off, he started hitting me. And he started saying it was my fault. He couldn't sleep at night. It was my fault that he cried himself to sleep because his family was gone. And today was my lucky day, and I would pay for it that day. So he took me way out in the woods. There was an old building out there. So when we got over there, he told me, he said, hey, he said, look at the sun one more time. He said, because you'll never see it again. He said, it's your lucky day. He said, because you're going to die today. And I was like, oh my God, already my eyeballs were everywhere. Like, where can I run to? Okay, that's too much because he'll shoot me. But if I run this way, maybe in the woods, he won't shoot me. But anyway, just while I was standing there thinking, he picked me up and he threw me inside the building. It was just a little bitty window. And it used to be an old courthouse, from what I understand, in the Launagee area, an old courthouse. So he threw me in the building, and he started beating me up, and he had a duffel bag in his hand, and he had a body bag. He said, "Look, I bought this for you. You like this?" It was a body bag, and I'm like, "Oh God, what's going on?" And he said, "And that lie, you went everywhere, all the way to Arkansas. You were looking for a lie just because I wanted some lie, and you went everywhere looking for it." He said, "And it was for you, bitch." He said, "Because I'm going to pour this all over you, and you will die a horrible death, slow, because you deserve it." He said, "Well, I'll just bury you." He said, "Because I already have your grave dug." He said, "And we'll just let the worms eat you." He said, "Or the pigs, the wild pigs, they'll be crapping you out later. So, I kept thinking, oh my God, what I get myself into? Oh my God, my kids, my kids, my kids. And so he sodomized me with himself and with sticks. And he raped me with himself and some boots. And a bottle of his whiskey bottle. It was a full bottle, a Crown Royal. He used that, and then he poured that in my privates, you know. And he was filming all this. He had the video right there, and he'd hit me, and then I would fly clear across the little building, and I'd fall. He'd pick me up, and then he would hit me again. I'd fly over this way, and then he got his lighter and he threw it at me, and my clothes caught on fire, and I started screaming, and my pants were on fire, and I'm like, oh my God. And I jumped out of my pants, and I started stomping on my pants and then he was just standing there against the table, just looking at me. I will never forget his eyes were like pure hate, looking right at me and telling me that that was my lucky day, and I needed to say something good about my kids because I will never see them again. So I was just standing there, and for some reason, I turned around. I just turned around and I just flew up and flew out that little window, and I'm standing on the other side, and I stopped. Instead of just running, I stopped. I turned around and I looked, and he was staring at me, and he said, "Why don't you come back in here and give your daddy a hug?" And I was like, "Oh my God!" And he had that liquor, and he was drinking it, and he says, "Come on, give your daddy a hug. Come on in here and give your daddy a kiss. I love you. I really love you, but you won't let me love you the way I want to love you. I just don't understand why. I love you so much. I hate you." And while he was talking to me like that, it was like in a trance. I couldn't move. I was just like, next thing I knew, he come flying out the window. And I turned around, I took off running, and I tried to climb up the chain link fence, and he caught me, and he caught me by the hair. And he threw me down, and he started dragging me. There was a pile of 2x4s. He threw me there, and he started hitting me with those 2x4s. And they were breaking in half, and I was standing there, and I was staggering around back and forth like an old drunk, trying to set up, and he kept picking it up and hit me one side, the other side, and I kept falling. And finally he ripped my panties off of me, and he just poured a whole bottle of liquor down my privates and threw me back in the building. And then when we got in the building, he says, okay, he said, it's time for you to really suffer. He said, because I have something for you. He said, he had this rock, real sharp rock. And he said, I am going to put this through your chest. He said, and you will die slowly. He said, in that fireplace right there, he said, that's where they will find your ashes. He said, because you're not the first person that was burnt here. He said, you see those ashes right there? He said, they belong to somebody else. He said, but yours are going to be there too. He said, because, and he did set the house, the little building on fire, but I'm sitting there and he had that sharp rock and I heard a voice and the voice told me to take my watch off because I was going to die there that day. You're going to die. Take it off. Take it off. And I'm like, oh my God, who's talking to me? Who's talking to me? So I took my watch off and I stuck it in the corner, I kind of just where he would, and this man was jumping at me, like his hair was sticking straight up. He was foaming at the mouth, and when I looked at him, his mouth was there was another mouth over his mouth, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? And I was just sitting there, and finally, he just looked around. I'm like, there's somebody else in here. There really is. And then he quit and he said, okay, okay, I'm done. He said, I'm just going to let you burn, he said. So he set the building on fire. He picked up his duffel bag and he jumped out the window. And I go, yes, Lord. You know, I may not have no clothes on, but I promise you, I will run out and I'm going to get some help. I told myself, I'm talking to myself and I'm looking through this little crack because I want him to get in his truck so I can run before the fire, the house come down. He stopped and he looked like he heard me. And I'm like, oh my God, he's coming back. He came back. He threw me out of the building. He threw me in the truck and he says, I'll give you a head start. Try to make it to the pond. And I'm like, no, no, why not? Any other time you run, go run to the pond. He tried to push me out the truck and I hung going. I'm like, no, no, no. He said, any other time you won't do that. You'll run. I'm giving you a chance. He said, okay, run this way. So he pulled it. He had a small pistol. He told me to run through the field. He would give me a chance. I thought about the field because I figured I could jump over the bluff and hey, maybe I'll die and he won't kill me. I won't die by his hands. I can jump off the bluff. Maybe it's high and maybe I'll die. I kept thinking. And he said, but if this won't reach you, this will. Anyways, so, and then he decided he was going to take me back home. Oh, before that, jumped, he jumped on my lap. He straddled me and he got his pistol and he tilted my head back and he put his hands on my face and he stuck the gun down my throat. So when he stuck the gun down my throat, he pulled the trigger and it went, and I'm like, oh. He pulled it out. He said, damn. Repositioned himself, stuck it back down my throat, pulled the trigger. He's like, oh, you got 9 lives? And I was just like, oh my God. And I was looking right at his face. Like I said, I will never, ever forget those eyes. Pure hate. Sometimes I still wake up and I'm like, whoa, oh my God, he was looking at me. He was looking at me, and I'll get up and I'm like, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. I still see those eyes. But he pushed it in the 3rd time. It still wouldn't go off. It just made noise. He was mad. So the 4th time he put it in, he pulled it, it clicked. He goes, and he really got mad. So he didn't take it out nicely. He jerked it out of my mouth, and the end part hit my teeth right here. The gun went off, and he shot me in the head. And I'm like, oh my God. He showed me. You know, and I looked at him and all that blood, the blood was just dripping off of his face. And I looked at the top of the truck and that blood was just dripping off the top of the truck. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, and I was just sitting there. So he jumped off and he got on the driver's seat. And then he said that I was dying. He said I was close to dying now, but he said that he would get a piece before I died and a piece after I die while I was still warm. So I'm just sitting there and he shot. He was going to shoot my leg. I scooted back and the gun went off and there was a hole that big in the doorway. So that didn't work either. I was still sitting there. I was still breathing. So he finally got tired of me and he loaded me up and took me to a creek down in Delawnagy and threw me in the bridge in the water. And I'm down in there trying to drink the water, trying to drown myself. I just couldn't do it. I, I couldn't die. By then, I was like, I don't know. I really had no feelings at that time. Then a car was coming and he said, if you come up or say anything, I'm going to kill who's ever in the car. And I didn't want nobody to die. So I stayed in the water and I kept thinking, oh my God, if the water was moving faster, I could ride the water all the way down somewhere on the other side of Cave Springs, maybe. It didn't happen. So he pulled me back out. He said he was done with me. I'm like, yes, thank you. And then when we got close to his sister's house, he said, no, I'm not going to take you home. So he took me back to his house, locked all the doors, and he told me to go clean myself up. I had blood all over my hair. I was still bleeding. I didn't want to go in the bathroom. I was scared because I had heard a voice. But 2 years before all this, I had been hearing a voice, and it says, you will die in your own room. And I'm like, what? You know? So he took me home. I didn't want to go in the bedroom. He told me to go clean up. I cleaned myself up in the sink. Still yet, I was trying to wait, like, oh my God, how can I get out? But he wrapped up the doorknobs with some rope and stuff where a wad of it where I couldn't get out. And he says that nobody's coming down because he told everybody that he was going to be there. So it was just me and him. So he turned what do you call that? The stove. The stove. He turned the stove on, and he told me, "Be quiet. Don't scream. Don't say a word because nobody will hear you." Besides, he said he took me up to the living room door, opened the curtain, and he said, "Look at the sun one more time, baby. It's your lucky day. You're gonna die. It's your last day." He said, "And I'll meet you in hell in a couple of days. I got business to take care of." He said, "So look at it, enjoy it." So he took me back to the kitchen and he put me in the corner where the shelves were. And he says, "Don't scream, don't move. I don't want to hear nothing from you." So I slid down. I sat there and I looked at him. He turned the stove on. I'm like, oh my God. I thought he was going to leave me in there and let me blow up, but instead he got some salad tongs and he put them over the fire and he put them to my face and he started peeling the skin off my face. And then oh my God, I'll never forget that smell, the burnt skin. And so he kept doing that. He'd put them back over there. Then he just everywhere. Then he burnt my lips together where I couldn't say nothing. And then he heated up some hot water, hot boiling water. He said he wanted some coffee. So he drank some coffee. He said, but it wasn't good enough. Ugh, it don't taste good. So he poured it in my head where I had that wound in my head. So he poured hot coffee in my head. And oh my God. But I never moved because he told me not to. So he boiled some water. He started pouring that water on my face. And then he got me up and he started hitting my jaw on the counter. He broke both of my jaws. But at the time, I wasn't feeling anything. I wasn't feeling my jaws being broke. I didn't know my kneecaps were hanging on the side of my legs. I didn't know both of my feet were broke and or my fingers, because when he finally got done torturing me, he said, he told me that I needed to fix his last breakfast. So he wanted his favorite, scrambled eggs, toast was his favorite. But he hadn't had that in a while because I wasn't there. So that's what he wanted before I died, his last breakfast. So I'm standing there and I'm mixing up the scrambled egg. And when I looked up to the side, I seen his toe and I thought, oh, whoa. And I looked up and he was standing there and he had a pistol and he was right at me. And I'm like, no. I did say no. No. I told him, I said, no, please don't. He said, do you have anything to say? He said, do you have anything to say? And I said, yes. He said, what do you want? What do you want me to tell your girls? And I said, tell my girls I love them. Okay, I will. I think I can do that for you. Yeah. Hmm. And he pulled the trigger and I watched that bullet come out. I stood there and I watched it and it took forever. And it finally hit me in the stomach. And I staggered around a little bit and I flew up and I flew on the eating table and I thought, oh my God, am I dead? And my stomach was hurting real bad. So I put my hand down there and something was sticking out of my stomach and it was a spoon. So I pulled the spoon out of my stomach and the bullet was sitting on the spoon and the bullet went flying up and hit the wall. And he come walking over there and he still had that 9mm in his hand and he says, damn bitch, you ain't dead yet. I just lay there. And I thought, oh my God. So he took me back off the table. He threw me on the floor and he started jumping on my stomach and in my chest. And he said that, like I said, I would die real slow. And I don't know how long it lasted, but God gave me another chance. And I told God I'd never turn back. And I survived that day. I made it to, I ran out in the woods. I ran naked. And he was shooting at me. And I watched enough movies, so I thought, well, heck, I was dodging, like running back and forth so that, he couldn't really get a straight shot. I was running back and forth, zigzagging myself through the woods. And he was shooting at me, and I got up to the road. And after that, I made it to where my kids were. My oldest daughter got me some help. I made it to Hastings, and I didn't know I was hurt that bad. I was still in shock. So I I couldn't tell them the whole story because me being so weak, me like being a zombie for him all those years, I knew if I would have walked out of that emergency room that night, I would have went straight back home to him, even though he done all those things that he did. Helping crisis, women, so many cops. Pick, all I seen was just lights, back and forth, lights everywhere. Everybody was taking pictures. There were so many cops in there. In helping crisis took me, my youngest daughter, my oldest daughter stayed with some cousins so she could finish school. And they took us to the shelter. And that's where I met Jennifer. That, and it took me a while to heal. I stayed there about a year and a half. I got some of the best care. I learned how to trust. I, when I found out I could really trust these women, I just, it, I just vomited everything. Ooh, it felt good. Just felt good, but it took I have a lot of problems now, but I'm doing good. My girls are doing good. We've made it. So I'm a survivor.
So you hearing her story you hear why my amazement that he only received 5 years for Mamie. Part of in Jimmy telling that just now was that it also was so soon. Law enforcement, our law enforcement for Jimmy was great. Carl Carl Eves was patient. He was what I wanted every officer I ever could work with. But it was too soon. She could not tell everything in the time frame that they wanted either. Normally, a shelter stay is 30 days. We knew she needed more, and she got more. She was there with us in the actual shelter for a year and a half. Moved into transitional living right after that. Uh, every Friday night, I would go in. I spent all weekend with Jimmy. She helped me actually take care of my son because I took my son to work with me. So she would help me take care of my son while she was there. And he was a little bit younger than her youngest daughter, and she nicknamed him Tiger. And she woke up every morning and made sure that Tiger had food and that he had breakfast. And I was so honored to be able to give her that care that she needed during that time. So, with that being said, when we start looking at domestic violence and how to address domestic violence in our community, it is what we see as the tip of the iceberg. What we talked about tonight was the tip of the iceberg because we have to look at everything that we talked about today, the power and control wheel, the cycle of violence. Why do they stay? The community resources. All of that just trickles down. And so when you are going back to your communities and you're sharing this information and you're having these conversations, remember you are that person they need at that time. And the best thing that you can do for them is to tell them, I believe you and it is not your fault. And I will do what I can to help you get where you need to be. So, with that, what Jimmy doesn't know is I was 2 days ago, I was in the middle of planning this, and I have never been able to personally thank Jimmy for everything that she has taught me. Uh, she has made me the advocate I am today. So when I took this job and she found out we had this program, one of the first things that Jimmy said is, Jennifer, I want to talk to my people. I want to tell them my story. I want to tell them that there is resources. I want them to know because I didn't know. So that was one of the first things when we got this new funding. I reached out to Jimmy. I said, are we still on? Can we still do this? And so we were talking back and forth all week. And I was shopping for everything. And I had my aha moment. Jimmy is a proud Katua, and I want to honor her for everything that she's gone through and what she is doing for our people. So I went to our secretary. Me and Travis went to our secretary and we was like, we want to put together an annual award. And the first recipient will be Jimmy. And we want to be able to do this in the future for any Katua that is doing great things for our people. So tonight, I am giving Jimmy a certificate. It is the Jimmy Ross Outstanding Legacy Award. Jimmy Ross is receiving this award for her unyielding spirit, passion, and outstanding work as a domestic violence advocate and survivor. In the future, the recipient of this award is a stalwart member of the United Katua Band and has demonstrated outstanding feats in representing their tribe based upon dedication, outreach, and excellence in their particular field or cause. So tonight, I want to be able to honor Jimmy for everything that she has done for me, for our tribe, for our victims, and everything that she has done to present and education in her story to everybody. I tried to tell her I wouldn't make her cry tonight, but it never works. Also, um, with that comes a lanyard, a hand beaded lanyard with a turtle, and we have our seal. So she will be able to go work at Cherokee Nation and show them that she is Katua. She also works with my husband, so we give my husband gives her a hard time too. So I told my husband she gets to wear that, and he better not say a word to her about it, and she'll set him straight. So with that being said, what we're going to do now is kind of move to a little brighter aspect of it. Caleb, can you bring me the basket, please, for some door prizes? Everybody got a blue ticket? If you don't have a blue ticket, last call. Okay, so this area back here is the things that we have door prizes for. So Caleb is going to be Vanna White for me, and he doesn't know it. So I'm going to put Caleb to work too. So when you're here, you get put to work. Caleb, which one do you want to give away first? Oh, that is a blanket that the CDC donated for us. So it's like an outside stadium blanket. So you unvelcro it, and it is a blanket for outside. So the lucky person is ticket number 472850. 50. Look at you. Give it. Are we going to do a little igloo bag and a poster? So we have this from the Native Alliance Against Violence. Raven, where are you? You made it. Okay. This is Raven with Native Alliance Native Alliance Against Violence. She drove in from Norman. I was expecting you, and so you are my other special guest. So this is NAV, and it is another resource for tribal coalitions as well as our members to be able to reach out and seek information. So the ticket number for this one is 472848. 48. 2848. Going once. Going twice. 472855. 55. Aha. You probably have the poster too, don't you? We have another blanket, and this one will go out to 472869. 69. I didn't know. The perks are coming in. We have another igloo cooler and a poster. No, I trust you. Look at that face. Look at that face. 472856. 56. There you go, babe. We have a poster and a cup from the CDC. 472843. 43. 2843. Chew. I love these little mugs because they come with a spoon. They come with a little spoon. So these were donated by our Natural Resource Department, and it comes with a beautiful poster, 2854. Did I call that one already? 2854. Okay, let's dig. 2839. 2839. Come on, Karen. Oh, it's from your department too. Oh, okay. Here you go, dear. Another cup from the CDC and a poster. We're going to do 2858. 2858. Here you go. Moving along, 2860. 2860. 2860. Let me dig in here. Dig deep. 2828. 2828. Here you go, ma'am. Chairs. We'll do the chairs. So we have, we'll do this one. A coffee mug from Natural Resources, 2844, 2844. Assistant Chief. Thank you. Yes. Now we have another poster and a cute little set of salt and pepper shakers. Little watermelons. So this one is 2832. 2832. Tell my husband that you won something. After you've been without him all week, you finally won something. We have these wonderful chairs donated by the Child Care Center. 2846. 2846. Joyce. For all your dedication and hard work, I'll just set it over here. And our very last one. 2840. Mary Gertie. So tonight I hope you're leaving with some information that you did not have before, some education and the ability to feel empowered to be able to help address domestic violence in our communities and be able to know that there are referral resources out there. We have Help in Crisis. We have our program. Each of our 9 districts has a domestic violence program or shelter for our women to go to. Men, we are not leaving you out. We also have resources for men. You cannot stay at the women's shelter, unfortunately, but we will have the ability to put you up in a safe home and provide the same resources to you should you be experiencing violence in your home. So with that being said, I would like to again thank the Henry Lee Doublehead Child Care Facility here who donated the prizes. They donated our drinks. The UKB Tribal Enrollment Department for the bags and the notepads. Our tag agency, our housing department, our Title VI for the building. Natural Resources also donated, as well as our council and our officers. I really want to send a thank you to our leadership. Sharon snuck in on me. Sharon Benoit, one of our council members, is here tonight. So I am very honored and appreciative for our leadership to be here tonight because that means a world to us and to our members, knowing that you support us and that you support this cause and that you will be there to help us in that fight. As well as, again, another big, huge thank you to Jimmy Ross for everything that she shares, for everything that she does, for telling her story, and for letting me be a part of her life for the last 22 years. She has She has taught me so much that she doesn't even know. I know we've had some conversations about how appreciative she is to Help in Crisis and the care that she received there, but I don't think that she has ever heard from Help in Crisis and the staff what she taught us and what she gave us in her time there and letting us be a part of her journey. So, if you will, I have t-shirts in the back for everybody. I believe I should have enough for everybody that came in. How many did we end up with, Caleb? Whatever fit on there today. But whatever it is, if you will set line up, Caleb will read them off. I had you put your t-shirt size. I want to make sure everybody gets a t-shirt. Staff, you do not get another t-shirt because you guys got t-shirts today. So staff does not get another t-shirt. Council, I have your t-shirts in your office as well. So with that being said, thank you so much for being here tonight, and it makes me feel good to know that we have the support out here with you. Thank you.